Hey there, this tutorial here is hopefully going to help you learn to better control your brushes in ZBrush, and also it's about how to mentally break down shapes into more simplistic shapes and just a general approach to sculpting. I think that this nose here is a good example because it's a hard surface looking type nose, so if you can create a complex shape like this with these kinds of hard edges, I feel like you could tackle just about anything in ZBrush. It's going to take some getting used to, but uh, I have the pretty simple techniques that I think anybody can follow. Um, as long as you've had some experience with ZBrush, like you know how to navigate. So I'm assuming that you know some of the basics like navigating, but I'm going to cover all the different brushes that I use here and just try to keep things as simple and easy as possible. This is the polished version, the final version. If I go to this Z tool, um, you'll see this is like the unpolished version, and I actually have the timeline here so I can scrub through the history quickly. If I go right to the very beginning, you're going to see we'll start with just a sphere like this, and I'll do this from scratch. But basically, if I scrub through this, you can sort of see the process that I used here. None of these techniques are really earth-shattering, but I think that there's a few things that I do here that are beneficial and probably one of the better ways to approach creating stuff like this and getting the results and the control that you want. So if I break digital sculpting down into two of the highest level parts, I see it mostly as your technical ability in ZBrush and also your artistic ability with just being a solid artist and sculptor. So I think one of the most important things to do first is to establish just some terminology, and that is going to be this here. This is just an image I found off the internet. Essentially, the idea of primary forms, secondary forms, and tertiary forms. To a lot of you, this will be really basic stuff. I just wanted to kind of get this out of the way early on so that when I'm explaining things, it makes sense to everybody. But the primary forms are essentially the first and biggest, most important thing. If you think about a nose, it's just this main shape that you pull out, the simplest of forms and the largest. The secondary forms here in this example of the nose is when you start adding some of those details where you actually have nostrils and you can see more than just the primary shape. You start to see like more complex shapes. And then tertiary forms also sort of like details. Oftentimes when it comes to head sculpting is stuff like skin pores and that. We're not going to really focus too much on tertiary forms. Well, we won't focus on it at all here because I think that the key to a good sculpture is really in the primary and secondary forms. Primary, again, being the most important. So over here, I've broken it down into two different phases. Depending on how polished it needs to be, you may not have to worry about this phase two, but essentially, this is what I just showed you with the timeline of what I did and an explanation of how I'm thinking about it. In the beginning, the first thing I do is just think about the primary shapes. So in this case, I think about the nose in the most simplest form, and I just mask that area out. And then using the move brush, I move it out and clean it up a little bit. Then in the next phase, I start to think about the secondary shapes. So in this instance, I'm saying that I'm going to bevel this here, and I'll explain what brush I use for that later on when I show this real time. But at this stage, it's modifying it for the secondary shape. And then in the third part, I start using a damn standard brush to sort of sharpen details out so that I can see the details in certain areas, which create landmarks for me. So the main thing here is to create landmarks and define edges so that you can evaluate the shapes and make sure that they're all lining up proportionally to each other so that it's describing accurately. what you're going for, in this case the nose, and then in this final part of this phase I just repeat these two steps here between creating secondary shape and creating landmarks. So just iterating there. This polish phase is essentially just sort of solidifying those shapes so they don't look so muddy. So that's done just with standard brushes at this point. So it's polished up. And then I do another pass for cleaner results where I actually duplicate this, auto retopologize it based on polygroups, which I'll show you how to do. And then I reproject, so I subdivide this one and then reproject the same details from here. And so these should actually look the same, but the advantage is you now have a low poly mesh with subdivisions that you can use, and you'll see that this essentially makes it so that you're not working against the mesh, it's working with you. So whenever you smooth shapes out, you actually get really nice polished results like you see here. So that's the final phase. But I'm going to do this all real time, so you'll actually see exactly what's going on there, and then I'll refer to these steps here that I'm showing you so that we're on the same page. As I mentioned previously, the way I see it is there's two main things to sculpting. It's the basic art skills and then the technical skills here. And up to this point, I've mostly been talking about the art skills and those sort of fundamentals with primary, secondary shapes. But a big reason for this really is the technical side of things and the actual brushes in ZBrush. So let's start covering that. The first thing I want to mention is that with digital, it's all about understanding the underlying geometry. And by that I mean there is topology there. It's all quads essentially. And if I look at it closely, you can see it's all these squares, right? So you're going to be limited based on the density of the mesh with how it's behaving, and it's important that you always think about that when you're sculpting. So as I'm showing you these different brushes, try to think about what's happening with this topology when I'm performing these actions, because that's going to give you predictability on how it's going to behave when it comes to these sculpting tools. And hopefully, maybe this is obvious for a lot of you, but hopefully this, if it's not so obvious, it'll make more sense in a little bit. But essentially, at the moment I'm limited to this topology. This is just the default sphere that you start with in ZBrush. I'm trying to keep everything as simple as possible and not do anything too custom. You can see my UI is very custom. I have tutorials on why I have my UI like this, but I don't want to get too into that. So I'm just going to focus on basic tools and explain what I'm doing with these tools. But essentially, if I were to just dynamesh this to like something lower, you'll see that I would be limited with my detail quite a lot if that was the case, versus before. Now I can add a lot more detail because there's more dense mesh. Okay, so you all probably know that, but worth noting for people brand new to this. So the main brushes that I use. Oh, before I get into that, I just want to mention a couple more things. I'm using a pressure sensitivity tablet. You're going to want to use that for any kind of finesse when it comes to digital sculpting. I'm sure you already know that one as well. Just thought I'd mention it. And also when it comes to viewing your mesh, that's going to be really important for you as well. And you probably want to use, therefore, you don't want to just use like a regular matcap. You want to use a material that actually simulates lighting, like the basic material. You can see that's selected in my UI right here. If I use something that doesn't use the lighting, like I think this polyskin doesn't, it's harder to read the surface in this case. It's just like a general thing, and I have the light settings over here. You'll see that it doesn't actually change when I move the light, and that's sort of a disadvantage. So it's not to say that matcaps don't have merit, but you'll want to be mindful of the fact that it might be hard to read the surface depending on what mat cap you have. So if I go back to one of my basic materials, you'll see that it it is actually responding to the light when I move it. So that's really helpful. Also, I have X symmetry on, so you're probably going to want symmetry on most of the time when you're sculpting, and to leave it on as much as possible to save yourself some time there. The main brushes. Now, I'm going to order these from most important to least important. I also suggest that you hotkey your brushes. You'll notice that my brushes, I'm going to be switching seemingly automatic. That's because I have a hotkey set for each of them, and that's going to save you a lot of time. Definitely suggest you do it. And the brushes that I'm talking about here can be broken down to just 9 brushes total. So that's not really too much to hotkey if you consider that you could have like Control 1 is one, Control 2 is another, Control 3 is another, Control 4, however you want to do it. But you can just use combinations of Control, Shift, and Alt, and kind of cover all your bases pretty quickly by doing that. So the first one I'm going to go over is obviously the standard brush. So you can see using standard brush, it has a nice smooth fall off. But the cool thing about this one is that if you add all kinds of like crunchy details, I'll just try to like get some stuff in there right now. You'll notice that when I use the standard brush right here, this standard brush, it doesn't destroy my sculpt underneath. It just kind of pushes it in or out. So that's a really important thing to understand, that it's going to try to preserve whatever's on the surface and just move the whole thing in or out. So if I had skin pores, I could actually like finesse this in a way that I don't lose any of that detail. Now if I were to use something else like the clay buildup, it will destroy those details. So that's I mean, in a lot of cases you'll want that, but sometimes you won't, and that's a critical thing to understand. But so the first one is going to be standard. This is going to be one of the brushes that you use probably most of the time, I think, but it just sort of depends on your style of sculpting. You'll see me going back and forth to it. I'm going to be using a lot of H polish with the kind of thing that we're doing in this demo. But my next most important brush would be clay, actually. So let me switch to that one. There we go. And so with clay, it's a lot like standard. It doesn't preserve the details as much as standard does, and it sort of comes on real flat, which gives you a nice effect in certain scenarios. Again, I'll explain the exact scenarios every time, but the important thing to know about this one is it comes in sort of flat because of the fall off, and it doesn't preserve details like the standard does. The third one I'm going to mention is the inflate, and the inflate just pushes things out on its normals. So if I go back to this detail here, you'll see that it is just pushing out on the normals. It can sort of like, and if you alt click, it'll do the opposite. So it kind of pushes in, and you can see it actually is going inside of itself there, which can be used in a lot of ways and can be very helpful. Most of the time when I'm using this, I just use it as like more a way of like subtly pushing stuff out. Like if I notice that there's like a little dent in something, I could use the inflate and just kind of like finesse it back to like its flat state. That's how you'll see me using it mostly in this case, but there's lots of uses for it. I'll try to be very specific about when I'm using it here. And then the fourth most important would be the move. So that's, everybody knows this one, but move brush is one of those things that I just suggest that you play around with a lot because it has a lot of nuances to it, and you can do so much with the move brush. Don't underestimate how awesome the move brush is. So those 4 ones, standard, clay, inflate, move, those would be the first four that I would consider hotkeying. And then there's like a group of 5 after that as very important ones. The first one I'm going to mention is the damn standard, of course. Damn standard I use actually, generally I'll use it on a low Z intensity. And the reason for that is I also use orb cracks to do something similar to damn standard, but in a different way. So generally what I use damn standard for is for larger shapes. So it does help to be on a lower Z intensity for that. For example, if this was like a cheekbone here, I could just like with a very big brush start to like lay down these shapes, and from there I can sort of like fill in, and that's going to give me just like real big shapes there. And you can use it for smaller stuff too, but the interesting thing about this is that like I can really do a lot like with these big shapes. Like I can pull the whole thing out like that and then carve back in, and now I have like a lot of control. Like let's say I wanted this to be similar, do that. And so it's really good for those larger shapes as well as smaller ones. I find it to be a little bit tighter than the cracks in certain circumstances, but I'll show you specific examples of that in a bit in practice. But so the next one is orb cracks, and this one I use mostly like when I just need like really deep cuts. Just want to like really get in and underneath something. That's what I'll use it for. And of course, with all these, you want to use the Alt key a lot, so the inverse. So standard, orb cracks, and then Alt key is going to push it out. And always be looking at the silhouette whenever you do something, so that you actually know what happened, because it might be hard to tell from certain angles. So I'm always rotating around, or even like moving the light to see what the surface is doing. So then that's orb cracks. Another really good one is pinch, and I don't really use it like a lot of people might use it, where I think a lot of people are using it to sort of move the mesh. Like this is kind of a primary example. I think they might use it to sort of do this sort of stuff more, where they're pinching things together, which is useful and there's a good reason to do that sometimes. The main reason why I use pinch though, actually, because sometimes that destroys your mesh, so that can be problematic. I use it in a way that it helps my mesh. So on these edges here, if I look at the topology, it's pretty loose. And so if I were to smooth this right now, I have smooth stronger on, by the way. If you want smooth stronger, you go to Lightbox, brushes, and there is a smooth in here. Where are you? Smooth, standard, smooth, and then smooth stronger. So I actually have that in my UI just to switch between the standard smooth brush and smooth stronger. I recommend you do the same. So you'll see I have smooth and smooth stronger to switch between those two. If I use smooth stronger right now, you'll see that it just kind of like turns into nothing. If I pinch this and make it really sharp and then use smooth stronger, you actually get like a really nice relaxation on this, and it starts to look like a perfect high poly mesh. So that's how I use pinch mostly, is I use it, I'm thinking about the topology underneath, and I'm trying to like essentially like relax things. I'm bunching it up together, and then afterwards I'm relaxing it, so it's like a perfect smooth edge, hard edge. So that's how I use pinch. And then the last one I'm going to mention in this group, well, there's two more. H polish. Most people know that as being the go-to for polishing things. Essentially what that will do is, in this case, it will look at the shape your brush is is pressing on, and it will sort of stop considering after the fall off the edge. This takes some getting used to, but essentially, like when you really understand how it works, it's a super powerful tool. It's one of the best ones too, actually. It's just not like a go-to sculpting brush as much. It's more like a polish brush. So these last ones that I'm mentioning are more like in the polish realm. But essentially, like I know that if I run this over here, because it's a flat surface, it's not gonna like fall off the edge and start muddying things up. It's just gonna crisp this whole area up and flatten this all out. This is mostly flat here, so if I run it over, it'll just crisp this whole area up. And that's the main way that I use this one, is I sort of set up my mesh so that I can polish it to get the hard edge look that I want. And this is kind of like also an example. Sometimes, and with the alt smooth on H polish, it pushes it out. So if you really run this a lot, the H polish will actually push it in like indent if you keep going over and over and over again. So like an example is like if I just keep going back and forth real fast, you see it's eventually going to indent in. But if I do alt and this brush go really fast, you'll see it's starting to push out. So sometimes you'll notice that the mesh looks like it needs to come out a little bit. There might be a little dent in there, or you might want it to go in further. So I'm always using one variation, alt or not alt click with H polish. And in the case that things kind of get dented, that's another time where I like to use the inflate brush again, because it just sort of gives me like a real nice fall off and finesse that I can just sort of ease it back in, and then H polish to clean it up, just like that. And so that's H polish. Then the last brush to mention in this group of polish type brushes, so there's 5 of them that I mentioned. This is Trim Dynamic. And Trim Dynamic I use just as sort of like a bevel type brush. So whenever I have an edge like this and I want to just split it into a bevel type shape, just like a flat surface. So creased surface to flat surface, like a smaller one, I just go ahead and just run that Trim Dynamic right over there. And that's basically all I use it for, is just sort of like flattening out sharp corners. And again, this has to do with thinking about the topology underneath. So if I pinch something quite a lot, if I wanted to flatten it out and do the opposite, I'm using Trim Dynamic. So here's a sharp edge. I can make this a nice like bevel real easy with this Trim Dynamic, and I really don't know another tool that's going to do as good of a job. You could try H polish, but you'll find that it's not even really working. It's like having a hard time understanding how to flatten that out. It just sort of like pushed it down in a strange way when I'm running H polish on there. But with Trim Dynamic, this smooths it out real nice. So that's how I would use Trim Dynamic. And then the last few brushes that I want to mention here aren't actually necessary for what I'm showing you here. These are just kind of nice to haves. So the 9 that I mentioned so far, standard, clay, inflate, move being the core ones, and then the more polishy type being dam standard, orb cracks, H polish, Trim Dynamic, and pinch. Also, by the way, do a Google search for orb brushes. If you've never heard of orb cracks brush before, you can download it. I'm not sure if it's free. If it isn't, it's super cheap. Totally worth it. One of the best brushes that isn't just shipped with Zbrush. So those are my main brushes. These nice to have brushes I'm not going to really use here. Believe it or not, a lot of people, they love the clay buildup brush. I do have that hotkeyd as well, but oftentimes I just use the clay brush rather than this, but it's essentially like clay with a harder fall off. So you see like a more chunky edge. If I go to clay, you'll see that it's like smoother. And I find that this is typically the behavior that I want. But the nice thing about clay buildup is it comes in so chunky that you can really see what you're doing. So visually, it works really well when you're just trying to rough shapes in and figure things out. So maybe more just like earlier on, but generally I don't even use it that much unless I clay, just regular clay is a lot weaker than clay buildup also. So sometimes I'll switch to clay buildup just to like really push something far, like inside the nostril. I might use clay buildup rather than just clay, because if I were using clay here, you see that it goes like real slow. So it's like barely pushed anything in there. Clay buildup though, it's just really carving out fast. So that's kind of the logic there with clay and clay buildup. Nice to have, don't actually need it. Clay buildup. The other one is move topological. That's really great because it considers the topology of the mesh and what's closest when you're moving things. So in the case of this hole here, if I use move topological, I can actually pull this top side down and it won't affect the other side. So something like a mouth or a nostril, it's easy to just grab one edge that you want. Because if I were to use just regular move brush and pull it, you're going to see that I'm actually like gonna likely move the bottom edge too. See how that bottom edge is moving? I might not want that. I might just want the top edge. So it's going to think about the topology first. So in the case that you know something's far away from the other side, you can use that to your advantage. So if I turn off symmetry here, move topological, easy to move that like that. Regular move. Well, it's not super obvious here, but there's a lot of use cases for move topological. We won't really need it with what we're doing here, but it is one of those ones that might be worth hotkeying as well. And then the final one is flatten. A lot of people don't use flatten, but it's kind of like another version of smooth. And it just sort of smooths things in a very flat type way, which is really nice. It's not the same thing as H polish either. It has its own sort of qualities to it. I sometimes I use it all the time. Sometimes I don't use it so much, but it's another one that I do have hotkeyed, and you don't necessarily need that one, but it is pretty handy once you get used to it. So, and then again, if I just talk about the different smooth brushes, which is, you know, essentially it's automatically hotkeyed for you on any brush. If you hold shift, it's your smooth brush. I use smooth stronger and smooth depending on the density and how strong I need that smooth. But another one to use is the alt smooth, which is essentially you hold shift to start smoothing, and then you let go of shift. And what that's doing, the difference between a regular smooth and the alt smooth is it tries to keep the shape more when you smooth, versus a regular smooth will just sort of like collapse things down. So if you have something that's more rounded, and you want to retain the roundness, but you just want to get rid of some like jittery feelings, I would alt smooth that. And if I just wanted to collapse it more and smooth the whole thing out, I would just use a regular smooth. So you can see the difference there. So alt smooth still has that ball, and then regular smooth, it flattens it down. That's the main difference there. So you hold shift, start to smooth, and let go of it. That's the alt smooth. You'll have to be pretty quick about it sometimes, so that'll take some getting used to. But it's good to know that that's there, because that's very handy for a lot of cases as well. But those are the main brushes that I use. I'll make sure to have them listed so that you can easily reference them, and definitely take some time to hotkey those if you can. And then the final thing that I'll mention is just about masking in general. Some people like to use the mask as a brush. So if you have it by default when you start ZBrush, it's more like this brush, which has a lot of use cases, but I find it to be a lot more helpful to have a lasso instead. And so this is kind of like one of the key things that I'm showing in this entire tutorial. So definitely pay attention to this one. Essentially, what I do all the time, which is one of the most powerful things you can do in ZBrush, I think, is I will mask stuff. and then I will smooth or use H polish. Because if I were to not mask stuff and then use H polish, I'm going to be collapsing stuff in a way that I don't want. So for instance, if I was trying to flatten this whole edge out, what I might do is I might just mask it like that, and then just sort of like whittle it down. And so like in this instance, like I might want to start out seeing it masked because it's like fairly like obvious. So I have the dam standard here. I could use the cracks, or I could use clay and just like push this stuff down and get it kind of where I want it. And then once I do, so let's say I want that, right? And so then, and I'm just using move brush now to move it into place. It's just about getting things where you want them about. And then I'm going to go ahead and just mask this bottom part. So now I have like a flat surface. And then if I hide my mask, there's an option for in the mask. So if you go to tools masking, you can view mask or hide the mask. Again, this is something that I hotkey because I use it so much and it's so useful. So it's just, for me, I can just turn it off and on with a hotkey. So it's still there. It's just I'm hiding it at the moment. And then if I switch to an H polish tool, I can go ahead here and just H polish, smooth a little bit, and then I get like a really, really hard surface. I just cleared the mask, and now I'm pushing this down, and then essentially, like this is like how, like, so if I don't want to disrupt this one, I just go ahead and mask that. I hide it, and then I'm just going to smooth that out. So, or if I wanted that to be like a tighter, like not destroy that so much, I could use the weaker smooth, and that would be like a tighter bevel, you know. So it really depends what I'm trying to do, but this method of masking stuff and then using the H polish tools, the smoothing tools, you name it, it's going to give you the most control over things. You'll see me constantly using that as we proceed with this, but this is just a demo of all the different brushes that I use, the explanation for them, and just try to remember like the different things that I mentioned about those, like the behavior of them when I'm doing this, and hopefully like seeing it in practice will make everything make a lot more sense. So now that I'm done here making this hideous creature, whatever the heck this is, let's get to the practical part of this where I'm going to actually show you making something useful. I'm just going to rewind this history. So I go back to the beginning of just having the sphere. Again, this is a default sphere that ships with Zbrush. I'm not doing anything special to it because I just want it, for the sake of following along, to be as straightforward as possible. Later on I will subdivide it one time, but you can see the active points is 43,000 right now. I've got my reference here, so that image that I showed previously of the process, I'm just going to have that up here in pure ref, always on top mode. So starting with just the sphere, the first thing we'll do is that first phase of pulling out the primary forms. When I don't have anything on the mesh to start, it can be a little disorienting because you can't really see where the center line is. So having activate symmetry on is helpful just to establish where the symmetry actually is on the mesh. But as you can see, if I was just looking at the end result like you typically would of trying to make this shape, the first thing I would be thinking of is what is the most basic way that I can simplify this shape, and it's just going to be like that triangle shape. So I'm going to start out by masking that triangle shape here. And whenever you're doing that, this primary form is just so important because it's going to be the foundation for everything that you do afterwards. So it's important to like take a little bit of time to study whatever you're working on, just so that you get it right from the beginning. Because if you don't, then it will be problematic later on. And I'm actually noticing now that was a little bit like rotated up, so I'm just going to redraw this. Again, with a lasso tool, it completes edges for me. So it's nice because I can just easily, like, if I click here and then alt click, I can subtract from that. So that's pretty handy. But yeah, I'm just trying to get this initial shape locked in. If I hold spacebar, I can move it also, and then click Alt if I want to subtract again. So that's good enough. I'm going to invert that mask, and then I'll just pull it out. So I've got a move brush, and I'm just making it really big. There's a thing called dynamic brush scale. If you don't know what it is and your brush isn't getting big enough, that's the setting you want to change. Just Google that one and you'll see where that's located in the UI. I just have it as a shortcut here because much easier that way for me. And there you go. So I moved that out. And I'm always thinking, as I mentioned, I'm always thinking about the topology. And because I just moved that, this topology is very stretched and very poor over here. So the first thing I'll do is clear the mask and just smooth that out so that it's not. So there's actually density in there for me to work with later on. Okay, so that's that. And then it looks to me like I actually didn't, I should have shrunk that a little bit. So maybe if I go back, if I just undo that and then just shrink this. So I'm using the transform tool, shrinking that. I think that'll get me closer to start. Also, one transform tool tricks is you could just like scale this like this, and that'll make that more flat if you wanted it more flat. It's not really a big deal though, because we're gonna just modify all this stuff later. But smooth that out, and then I'm going to use the damn standard and alt click to just create hard edge there. And then I'm going to pinch it to make it even harder. So now when I smooth it, it will do what I want. So, but actually, so you can see here, like this is an example of it actually didn't do what I was expecting. And so if I just mask this out quickly, if I smooth it now, it's going to not collapse that edge on the side. You see that? But essentially, now I'm going to switch to the H polish. Just smooth that one out there, smooth that out there. And so it's just kind of like a balance of all that stuff. And now whenever I'm doing this, I'm moving things into place so that it's like in the general location that I want. And that way, whenever I sort of smooth stuff out, it just needs to be close. And then I'm going to use the tools to control it further. So another thing that's kind of like a minor detail is I flattened that mouth area out more, the area around the nose. So to do that, the easiest way would be to just start masking out this shape again. And as I mask this, it's actually masking the back as well here. So if I want to, I can like unmask it. It doesn't really matter though, because you could just sort of approach that any way that you want. Like if it's masked back there, it's not going to affect anything if I'm just sculpting over here, but kind of just depends about what you're doing again. Does it matter or not? In this case, it wouldn't, but sometimes I'll just do stuff just because it makes me feel less stressed about it. So like that's kind of what I'm doing here with flattening this out more than I really need to. So again, if I'm moving really quickly, that's because everything's hotkeyed. Always look here as I'm doing stuff to see what brush I'm using. So this is just a move brush. I'll try to call it out though as much as I can. So there's really nothing to this at this point. It's just a simple shape, and you really can't go wrong at this stage. Anything that you get here, as long as it's just like essentially that rough nose shape. It's fine. So you can see that I'm just using a damn standard to kind of cut out those edges more. If I really wanted this to be nice on there, I could just mask it out. Mask. Hide the mask. Using the H polish. Coming over there, H polishing a bit, smoothing. And that's kind of the name of the game. That's what you're going to see me doing all the time here. It's just that combination of masking, H polish, smooth, damn standard, orb cracks. Just keep doing that all over the place, and you have so much control. It's really awesome. Under here, I can see that it's kind of, it feels like it's pushing in, sort of. So what I would use is the H polish and then hold Alt, and that would kind of like make it more pushed out flat, if that makes any sense. And then if I want to protect this edge and just sort of smooth, just smooth brush over there with that edge protected. And you can that could be the way that you do a lot of stuff too, is just literally using the smooth brush with the masking. If this is like, looks like it's pushed out a little bit there to me, just with the H polish, just run over here real quick. If the brush is small enough, it will protect these edges. Now if I go too big, it'll start destroying stuff. So you got to be careful of that, with the brush size. So with the brush big there, it kind of messed up all kinds of stuff. So that's where you want to think about the masking, or if I can just use a smaller brush and get at that surface without disrupting other surfaces. And that's understanding that behavior is really the key to all this. And move that over a little bit. But this is way more than what I needed to do for this. I'm just trying to explain different scenarios potentially. So let's just move on to the next one. And the next one, I'm just doing the sort of like bevel to start working. So this is my primary shape. Now let's start working on the secondary forms. And usually that means that it's just more like forms within forms. So in this case, I'm going to use the trim dynamic brush, and I'm just going to run it over these edges to create that bevel effect. Go over there, again. Let's go right up here. And you'll notice that the topology, it's pretty low, and it's like starting to freak out a little bit because of the nature of it being low. But we can actually go quite a ways with this before we have to worry about that. So let's just ignore that, and you can just sort of pretend that it's not as bad as it is or something. But yeah, so that's literally all I'm doing here. Maybe what I'll do is, because this is more like I think that's a hexagon shape, I'm going to take the damn standard and just run that right up here to create that little edge. And again, just identifying these landmarks, pushing them out. That is damn standard, and then clay. So clay to fill it in. So I created the edge with damn standard and used clay to fill it in. I'm going to switch to H polish to smooth it out. I noticed that this is like a surface that's flat in our example. So I'm just going to use a bigger H polish brush and just kind of go over that. Now, when it comes to, there's a tilt on that shape that kind of goes back from the top. If I want to do that, it might be easiest for me just to use the move brush. Another thing that I could do is I could use a standard brush, because remember, it's going to preserve these details. It's not going to destroy them. So I could just like use a standard brush and just gently run over that and then clean it up with H polish again. So that's flat again because I used the H polish, then smooth brush. If your smooth brush is too weak or too strong, change to smooth stronger as needed. And then this edge should be following up to the top. So I'm just using damp standard again for that. Pinch it a little bit so it's extra strong. Clay buildup in the middle to fill it in. H polish, polish the top so it's smooth again. And then maybe just smooth a little gently here. H polish, smooth. Do that. So it's just back and forth with those different brushes. I think that this should probably be like pushed back further, so I'm going to use trim dynamic for that. Just kind of keep running it over until it's like sort of smooth, and that should just push that edge back further. Run it right here, push that a little bit further back. So I'm really just trying to define hard edges. And this is good just for practicing these creating these primary shapes. So it's good practice, but I think you'd be surprised, like if you can control this stuff, how it just enables you, like you're gonna think about things differently. Even if it's not gonna be like working on something that's like hard surface looking like this, you'll think about different approaches and you'll get much better results. Just understanding how to do this specifically is the goal. So literally just kind of messing around. Don't really need to do this much more, I don't think. Let's just move on to the next one. Next phase. So next one will be creating these landmarks some more. So first thing I think of when I see this version is there's holes here. So I could use orb cracks to just really carve that out strong. So let's just get in there and do that. The topology doesn't look so great here, but don't worry about that right now. It's totally fine. Sometimes when it's really chunky like that, I'll just smooth it because it'll sort of like blend things so that it gives you a little bit more evenly laid out topology. So just smooth it some and then try it again. It's a little bit better. Again, not going to worry about it yet because we're going to take this as far as we can. So like, yeah, just to help with the stretching, I'm smoothing a little bit here and there. And next thing I can see, let's use the trim dynamic to make that a flatter surface there. I think I'll need to pull that in eventually, so I'm just going to do that now. Maybe it shouldn't be down so far, so I'll pull that up, pull that one down with a move brush. Use the damn standard to define that edge a bit more. H polish with Alt to flatten that out. So we're starting to get more of this upper part, the bridge of the nose. So let's go ahead and do that. So I think that it's probably cutting somewhere around here. And again, I kind of just free sculpted this demo example, so it's like not like it's perfect or anything, but I'm just going to try to follow it pretty accurately so that I'm doing things with intent and I'm not just randomly doing stuff and saying that it's right, because I don't think that's super helpful to see people do that. So and another thing that I think about a lot when I'm sculpting this stuff is I want to make sure that I don't move things in a way that I lose topology in places. So rather than just use a move brush and like if I pull something out and then start trying to sculpt on there, I might not have a lot of topology up there. So I try to like smooth things and push them rather than like do extreme pulls. There's not a lot of great examples in this demo, but I just want to mention that like it all comes back to thinking about the topology underneath as I'm working, because you want to make the best use of it so that you're not just wasting time like having to keep dynameshing things or whatever to like get topology back. There's a lot of strategies that do it pretty quickly actually, but I'm a big believer in making the most of your topology and not subdividing before you really need to. I think that it forces you to focus more on primary forms, which are the most important here. So yeah, just moving stuff around. I could use the standard brush here. I haven't been using it too much, but it's good for just like pushing this in because it looks like it's sort of bellowing out a little bit. And even if it looks like really sloppy, don't really worry about that too much, because you're just, again, the goal here is to get things sort of in place and then and then polish. So the whole time I'm just establishing landmarks, getting things in place, and then polishing accordingly. It's not like I'm not like trying to get the end result from the beginning. I'm just trying to systematically work my way up. So that approach is going to be a lot better because you're really not going to have the solution in the beginning ever. So approaching everything this way will save you so much time. Actually, I think like if you go slower and you have a better plan, sometimes it can result in you getting to the end faster just by virtue of you being more direct in terms of beginning into the end versus like having to noodle on something for too long. So again, establishing primary forms first and getting those pretty accurate is going to save you a lot of time. I don't need that shape, but I am going to need that one. So just establishing that plane there. And yeah, I think that's fine for here. Let's just move on to the next one. See what we're doing. So getting some more hard surfacey shapes in there. I can see that like underneath the nose, there's like an extra amount of detail. So just use the damn standard to push it out some. And then pinch it, pull that out. I'm gonna use trim dynamic now to kind of get that flat surface there. And then clay buildup to fill this in. There's a hard edge here, so I'm going to use damn standard, and since it's like getting really crunchy now, I did a little pinch there and just pulled it out. So again, like if you really know how to control this topology, you can do a lot with a little. Like if you were to like be sitting here looking at the topology, be like, no, you can't create that hard look with so little over there. It doesn't seem like it would be able to do it, but actually you kind of can. So just a matter of moving things around and keeping your eye on the shading of everything. So, but I mean, I can subdivide this at any minute now, but I just wanted to get these, just wanted to finish getting some of these primary cuts in there so that like each one of the planes that I see in this version here in front of me is represented over here. So, and then I'll subdivide it because I'm just going to need to eventually with this. So that's H polish on that edge. It's interesting. So I think the correct thing to do here, this is probably not necessarily this line, but I'll just show you what I do with damn standard as a big brush, just kind of running it over. That's going to create that kind of indent, and then I can just adjust that, and I could do the same thing as the inverse here, pushing it out. And all I really did there with a large damn standard is I created those bigger geometric shapes, almost like as if I just modeled it with a simple modeling tool. But you can see how you can so easily get hard edges that way, and that's way too much now that I look at it. But it's a good example of like what you can do, like how easy it is, just a couple strokes to get that effect. And I just move this, and then once I have the shapes there, it's pretty easy because I can just move them to about where I need them, and then polish it some more. And that's the whole thing. So It's kind of silly how far that's in, but yeah, I'll just pull it out there a little bit, be a little more reasonable with that indentation. I don't think it's like hardly there later on, but let's just see where it is. Usually I wouldn't be like working in this stage. I'd be like just looking at the last result of what I want to get and then thinking about it that way. But I just want to break it down into actions for the sake of this demo. So that's probably good. Just move that edge a little bit. I think actually there's an extra like crevice here that I forgot to add in where it sort of comes in from behind. So I'm just carving that out just to start. But that's good for now. I haven't really been too particular with the masking because I haven't been super precious about these hard edges at this point. I'm okay with it being pretty dirty. But I'll do more of that later when I get to the polishing stuff. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, okay. So that's basically it right there. This is all going to be polishing type stuff now. So I can see that I did actually add a little something there. So let's just subdivide this one time. This is only it's still under 200,000, so it's very low. I could go many more times. You know, ZBrush is going to handle 4 million polys on most machines, no problem. So we're doing really well. Topology, like not stressing the system at all. It's super simple stuff. But I just used the damn standard to pull that out a little bit. Now I'm just going to use a move brush, kind of make some corners with the move brush, which is why the move brush is so awesome. You just establish the hard edge that you want and then just kind of make sure that you get it into place. And it's that easy. I'm using clay to push in this nostril some more. Just smooth it out because the topology is like really falling apart on the inside, which is to be expected when you have something that was started from a sphere. Like these are like shapes within shapes. Obviously, like there's not going to be a lot to go around there, especially with a low poly mesh like this. So establish some more of these. I'm going to use, when I think about this edge here, I think I want like a flat surface coming here. So I'm going to use trim dynamic and just carve that out a little bit. And then damn standard, add that back in, H polish with alt to add it there. Maybe just do a little cut with damn standard there. So I'm just creating this as like a geometric shape. So, and then I can pinch this corner, get that a little harder, damn standard on this edge, pinch it some more, H polish, pulling that in a little bit. I've got a couple extra shapes there, looks like, so I'm just gonna damn standard with alt to pull that out. Without alt, pull it in. Maybe with the H polish, just push a little bit in there, or that was clay, sorry. Clay to push it in a little, and then H polish to smooth it again. Standard brush, I just want to push this a little bit, standard. Get that flatter looking. And whenever these edges are like hyper sharp like this, because it's pulling out past it, like I can see this like weird distortion. I'm just thinking, okay, I could use small H polish brush, come in there with alt and push it right to that edge. Same thing over here, alt right to the edge there. And then when it's super crisp like that, I know that it's got to be all like tight in there. And I can use like a regular smooth maybe and just get it like sort of like a nice fall off. We're not going to be too precious with these here because the final phase of polishing this thing. We'll cover that. But let's see. Just gonna move this down a little bit so it looks more like it does over there. That's a trim dynamic because I want to be a little stronger with that. Push that in with damn standard. I could be using cracks if I want it stronger. I think I want this flatter on this edge, so I'm using the move for that. Just kind of moving it into place. This would be like one case where I'm gonna say that I want to get this back surface flatter. It's starting to get pretty sloppy around there, so I'll just go ahead and mask this here. Masking it out. And now that this is all going to be preserved, if I do anything, I'm going to hide it. It's still on, still masked, and just smooth it. Let me just smooth stronger. Could use a H polish too if I want it like more flat there. And just getting this background stuff, even though it's like there's no real reason to do that, just other than it's sort of bothering me that it was so like kind of messed up looking over there. And then I'm just going to smooth this again and let it sort of blend into there, and then again with damn standard carve it out again. That back and forth of smoothing and carving out. That's H polish. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. The last phase is, and I could be more particular with this if I wanted to, but I think this is good for demonstration purposes. I don't want to like waste anybody's time with this stuff being really specific, but if I want to get it even cleaner with these sort of facets, what I would do is I would duplicate this mesh. So I'm going to say duplicate, and then I can auto retopologize this. So I prefer to do that by using polygroups so that it conforms better to the mesh. So right now it's all one polygroup. So the easiest way to do that would be to just literally start hiding it. So I'm going to use the lasso. I think what I'll do is just do a big chunk like this. And be careful that you can see the back. I'm turning double on so that you can see the back here. There's some stuff going on back there. And so with this, I know that I need to get rid of this section here. Just kind of with the Alt, it will hide it. So I'm just going to go through pretty carefully and do that. Going to delete lower and then say group visible. So now we have this sort of carved out of its own thing. Last thing that I do lots of times is I'll just get these nostrils as their own polygroup because that'll force it to do loops in that area as well. I'm just going to hit grow one time, and then I'm going to do a polish by features to smooth that edge out and say group visible. So now we've got this polygroup here for the nose. Just defining that some more. This is just to help it with the auto retopologize. You really don't need to be so specific with the polygroups and stuff if you don't want to. It generally does a pretty good job on its own. But now I've got nostrils, the nose, and then it's separated from this back of the face or whatever that is. Then I'll go ahead and say auto retopologize with groups on. I'm going to do the target polygon count to about 1, which should be good for our purposes here. Just hit Z remesher. And that should be pretty decent when it's done. So there you go. Not bad, right? And that has the general shape. And now we want to get it back to square one where we were. So now it's like this is all dispersed evenly. So that's why it's going to work so much better now, these polygons. So if I hide this other stuff and I show the previous one, now solo mode on, you just see this. The other one is showing, but it's because it's solo mode, you can't see it. I'm subdivided a couple times. So now I'm at 145, which is, again, pretty low. And then I'm going to show the other one, do a project all. Now we've got this version, which is our, this is the new version. I have solo on again. I'll hide this so that's not confusing. But you can see that I can go up and down now, and it's crunchy like the other one because I just projected from the other one. But the cool thing is if I do like a regular smooth on this, it should start smoothing a lot nicer than it was before because the topology is supported at all these major angles on the low poly. So I can just go through and gently smooth stuff out. And then, yeah, so do just a real gentle smooth on this stuff. And then if you want to, you can come back in and clean it up further. Same exact stuff. But you'll notice that this time when you clean it up, because it's got better topology, it'll just behave better. Like whenever I'm like doing the same H polish and that, and then I smooth it, it's gonna like just give you like much nicer edges than it did previously. So same stuff, pulling edges out, damn standard. Touch that up there, but I'm not gonna get too particular because I think you get the point. Carve that edge out there. And then, so like whenever I see this, this is maybe worth noting. Whenever I see this, it's, to me that bothers me. It's like weird shading. And so I'll just like go ahead and mask this over here. And so there, it doesn't matter on this nose example, but it might matter on something that you do, where it is like you need really clean results on these transitions. So I'll literally just go ahead and do that and then mask it and then smooth it, smooth stronger, and just kind of remove that that strange smoothing. And you could just go through and again be as specific as you want about this. So after I've done it, I'm going to clear my mask and just smooth again with a weak smooth just to get like a nice transition. And you can always like take a look at the surface and see what's happening. If maybe it was like bellowed out, and so it's not gonna help for you to smooth it out so much. Like you have to first fix the fact that it's like there might be like a point or something. So it's always worth looking at from all angles to see exactly what's happening. This is a inflate, so I'll just inflate this to sort of like finesse that out, and then H polish, push it back in. Get like a nice tight edge there. Could just use a damn standard. This edge, it's a little too much, so pinch it and smooth. H polish. So you can see that I'm starting to get pretty good results now. That when I'm polishing this up, you can almost make it as perfect as you want to. Sometimes if it's like trickier shapes where there's other things around it, I'll just like make a square of a mask and then invert it, hide it, H polish, smooth, and it's going to be pretty perfect. So that's the approach. Do the same thing here. That. Invert it, hide it, smooth. Yeah, so it's a little inflate on the edge, just transition better. Okay, that's enough messing around with this, I think. I think you all understand what I'm talking about with this. I think this is pretty good results for just showing you real quick on the fly. It's hard to not like come in here and start just cleaning stuff up further and further for no real reason, just because it's there. But yeah, hopefully you learn something from this. You have fun with it. I got actual decent topology here where I can move up and down and maybe even use this for something. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and I will try to improve this if there's something I missed. Thanks for watching. See you.